pay attention to something bigger than yourself that motivates you and take some action, and then more starts to illuminate along the path.
Welcome to Starting From Nothing, the Foundation Podcast. This is where we interview successful entrepreneurs and founders to learn how they've started their businesses entirely from scratch. Here's your host, Andy Drish.
What's up, boys and girls? Andy Drish here, coming at you from Boulder, Colorado. And today I'm with James Schmachtenberger, which is kind of a mouthful to say. James and I met 3 months ago. Is that right, James? Something like that?
Yeah, it's about that.
Somewhere in March in San Diego. And I'm going to read you his official bio. So James is a San Diego area tech and wellness entrepreneur, filmmaker, political activist, and former director of a holistic health college. James' broad and accomplished background stems from a unique education emphasizing the interconnected nature of large-scale problems. And this is what's driven James's entire life to approach societal and health challenges with solutions that account for the entirety of a problem rather than solving for one issue while creating another. And that's what's led him to found recently the Neurohacker Collective, an applied neuroscience company, which has assembled some of the world's most accomplished doctors, scientists, and intellectuals to address the optimization of human consciousness itself. And their first product to market, Qualia, is a revolutionary cognitive enhancement product. It's established itself as the most advanced nootropic on the market. And James is with us today to talk about what Qualia is, but more importantly, to hear how do you become somebody who has that type of bio, who thinks about problems in that type of way, where you're thinking about such large-scale problems, and how do you use that to actually, and how do you use business and products as a way to change the world and up-level humanity as a whole. So James, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So for those of you listening, you guys know I grew up in Iowa. Yeah, what you guys may not know, I grew up in a farm in Southeast Iowa. And right next to like this area, there's this place called Maharishi University. And we talked about that. James and I talked about this because that's where James grew up. He grew up 15 miles from where I grew up. Growing up, I always thought Maharishi was like this weird cultish type place because I was like this farm kid on the other side of it all. And then 20 years later, I circle back and like, I find that they're just 15 years ahead of the curve for what most people are thinking. I mean, they were talking about meditation and stuff when I was in grade school, and now it's becoming something that's mainstream. So you grew up there in a really unique environment. Now you're off doing all this cool stuff with Qualia. What was it like growing up there?
Well, I don't remember a lot of it because we were there for the first few years of my life before I moved away. Although I did move back to go to college there for a year. And, it was a particularly cool and interesting place because though there were probably some cultish elements to it, there were some real brilliant elements to it as well. Right? There was this whole university that was, a multi-year accredited college, taught all kinds of different programs, but taught them through the lens of universal principles. And so rather than just straight up academics, it was looking at, what are kind of universal principles that guide all of life and human existence, and how do we understand every topic through that lens, and as a result, then how essentially every topic is fundamentally connected.
Yes. So this is amazing. For those of you who don't know, it's also like the founder of Transcendental Meditation. This is where it all kind of stemmed from. Oprah has her staff do TM twice a day. Like TM is becoming something that's pretty well known and popular. I remember when I was a kid, like the Beach Boys would come to, every once in a while, like stars or celebrities would come to Fairfield, Iowa, to learn this stuff. And one of the things that I remember being so unique about this place is that it had a bit of a reputation for churning out really incredible entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. I worked for a handful of them when I was in college. In the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, there was like a handful of like 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million companies that were being built, which was really, really fascinating to me. So when you talk about universal principles and why these matter, and talking about the interconnectedness of all things, why is that something that an entrepreneur should be taking into account when he's or she's starting to think about what business they want to build? And to add on to that, it might be useful to define what do you mean by universal principles so that we all kind of have a shared context for what that actually means.
For the most part, especially in Western society, we have a tendency of thinking about things very separately. And, we think about our health in one arena, we think about our business in another, our relationships in another, and we do a similar thing on larger scales where we think about, politics is one thing, and then the environment is another thing. And we don't look at how all of the different facets of life actually interconnect and guide each other, right? You can't have an environment that works when you have fundamentally flawed politics, and you can't have a political system that is intelligent and works when you have shitty education. And like all of these things tend to play together in profoundly interconnected ways that if you don't take into account not just the one thing that you're looking at or that you're interested in, but instead take into account how that plays with everything else, you're going to be looking at too narrow of a picture. And as a result, have a much lower likelihood of being able to succeed at whatever it is that you're caring about, and have a much lower likelihood of being able to create any kind of real impact.
Nice. So if you're not thinking about the macro, the big picture, and how these things interrelate, you might just build something that is just the next Band-Aid that is going to be gone in a matter of years because something's going to evolve, or it's just not going to have the impact that really matters, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I guess to give an example, like I grew up with a very activist orientation and was doing door-to-door fundraising for Greenpeace as a kid, and
really
working with, yeah.
How old were you?
I started doing that when I was 10.
No shit.
Yeah.
10 years old?
I mean, technically they wouldn't employ me at 10, so they employed my parents, but then as a cute 10-year-old who could like learn certain lines, I was a lot more effective at raising money going door to door than other people.
Oh yeah. What was that like? Do you remember?
I loved it. It was pretty spectacular, actually. For the most part, there were some things that were shocking about it, especially as a 10-year-old. Like I didn't realize at that time that there was a whole population of people that thought that the idea of protecting the environment was bullshit. And so we would end up with certain circumstances where I'd like walk up to someone's house and say, "Hey, I'm with Greenpeace. I wanted to talk to you about the environment." And they would sick their dog on me, and I would have to like run out of the yard being chased by a Rottweiler.
Holy cow.
So it was interesting, especially at a young age, to get to see the substantial differences in worldviews that people held. But for the most part, the ability to learn about the world around me at that young of an age, and how the day-to-day choices that we make actually affect a bigger picture, and to be able to like devote large portions of my time and life energy into that space was pretty profoundly like shaped my life growing up.
This is amazing to actually, for me to fathom a 10-year-old having these types of epiphanies so early and so young, of like the importance of the collective, the big picture as a whole, like Earth, why we are here, like us as a human race, without all of the separateness of our city, our country, our state, against the next one. But to have that level of awareness at such a young age seems really rare and unique.
I was definitely very fortunate to have parents who were particularly aware and who wanted to not just parent, but really kind of treat my life and my brother's life as a experiment, and see, what is possible in life and in raising humans if you don't just go with the status quo, but you actually really deeply contemplate what's possible and apply into those areas.
Mm-hmm. What were your parents like?
My parents were both very cool. My mom was a professional ice skater from New York, so very kind of driven, A-type personality, accomplished a lot and super outgoing. My dad was essentially a country bumpkin turned philosopher.
Whoa.
And, he grew up in like rural Colorado, didn't really have an interface with anything outside of the woods around him, but always sort of had a sense that there was something more. And then as he got a little older and started getting introduced to philosophy, he dove deeply into that world, and particularly kind of found his calling in the philosophy of raising humans.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a big focus for most of his life. And even now, on a pretty regular occasion, we'll have friends who are getting pregnant or have young kids, and they'll come and spend just hours on end having deep dive conversations with him on parenting philosophy.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm super curious. Maybe we'll bring him on at some point. Libby and I just got a dog, and so it's strange because it's like a baby step into parenting, and I'm noticing how the dog does things to like pivot us against each other, and just like really what our styles are when it comes to dealing with conflict or whatever. So,
yeah.
Do you think about philosophy a lot on a day-to-day basis, or like how what philosophies really shape your lens in which you see things?
I would say lately, with as busy as I am, I don't get to spend as much time thinking on philosophy as I normally do. But without a doubt, philosophy has been a big part of my life. I think for me, the major area of kind of contemplation or philosophy has been around a couple main things. One is the interconnectedness of life, the way that we all either do or don't impact one another, and how to be able to expand our capacity for awareness outside of ourselves or our immediate sphere and be able to actually hold a much bigger picture. Mm-hmm. I think this has been a big area for me. And then one of the other major ones that I am kind of routinely in is understanding underlying human motivation and what are the memes that we culturally buy into and how that shapes our daily choices and what we do as individuals, what we do as societies, and both trying to kind of grasp and understand how things have developed the way they have, but then also what would be necessary to shift a lot of these underlying motivations so that we can move the world in a direction of real sustainability.
Yeah.
Since the current kind of collective memes don't support that very well
at all. Yeah. So what's really interesting for me is the idea of the interconnectedness. And I'm thinking of somebody listening, and they're like, you know what? I'm sitting in my job and I hate my job and I want to be doing something else. I want to be spending my time doing stuff that I want to be doing. How is having the experience of a more connected perspective going to help them with that type of thing? Because this is something that I see in really successful entrepreneurs. They're actually thinking at that macro of a level. They're thinking of like, what are the world's biggest problems and how can I contribute to those? And when people are like just getting started, their mindset is shrunk. And it is purely focused on, often is very focused on them and getting their baseline needs met or whatever it is. So can you talk a little bit about like the benefit of up-leveling that so that you feel more of a connectedness on a day-to-day basis? And then how can people actually go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, whatever it is that we put a substantial portion of our time and attention into is what's going to take up our awareness and shape the types of thoughts we're having and the types of actions we're taking. So if our thoughts are very much focused around how do I get my needs met individually, then that's going to be the extent of where your mind really allows you to go. And though that's critical, and if we don't have our basic needs met, life doesn't work, that's not really a meaningful or motivating place to spend a huge portion of time and attention. What tends to happen is that when we start to expand our awareness into a bigger picture, and particularly not just understanding a bigger picture, but having the internal question of how do I contribute to a bigger picture in a meaningfully beneficial way, then what starts to happen is that there's still a need to have your basic needs taken care of. That still has to occur, but now it becomes sort of a side thought and oftentimes substantially easier. Because when you're starting to think at a community or a national or a global scale, and you're thinking about the work that needs done at that level, and you need to get your needs met, it's just sort of a side thought where you're like, okay, well, if I'm working to take on this huge project or raise this capital for this, I'm going to apply a small percentage over here. And then basic human life just sort of happens. Like I haven't had to think a lot about personal basic needs for a very long time. And it's not because I've just always had a huge amount of money. Like there have been times where that's true. There are times where that's not true, but it's never really where my attention is. My attention is always on a bigger picture. And as a result, I just do what's necessary to make sure that my own basic needs are taken care of, which happens fairly easily. And then I get to have my real life engagement, my creativity, my flow, my everything dedicated to something that is ultimately so much more motivating.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. So a few different things I want to talk about. It makes me want to talk about universal income with you and what your thoughts are on that. I want to talk about how to up level that on a day-to-day basis. Like, how do you connect to that? How do you shift from thinking about self to something bigger and make that habitual? And one thing before going into that, I had a friend who got to meet Richard Branson for the first time, and Richard's like his hero. And so he goes to Necker Island, and he's so stoked because he has this question that he wants to ask Richard about his business and how to continue to up level his business. And so he goes on and he's like, so here's all the things that are happening. This is what I want to get to. Like, da da da. What do you think? And Richard just kind of looks at him. He's like, so. And he holds up his hand like this, and he's like, so what you're talking about right here is you're sharing this, and this is, and he draws a P on like the hand of his hand, and he says, this is your problem right here, and you want to know how to solve this problem, right? The guy's like, yeah, totally. It's like, if you want to figure out how to solve this problem, and for those of you just listening, not seeing the video, like I said, I'm drawing a P on the palm of my hand, and he says, you want to know how to solve this problem, and he draws a box all the way around his hand. It's like, if you want to solve your problem, start thinking about a problem that is this big. And if you think about a problem that's this big, this little one that you're just like stressing out over right now is just going to get solved pretty immediately. It's like Elon Musk trying to figure out how to terraform Mars. It's like, how do we create a place where we can live on another planet? It's like, well, we have to figure out space travel, and then we have to make rockets renewable, and we have to do this, and this, and you know what would be one person's lifetime work is what he's trying to achieve in the span of 3 years. It seems like. So how do you become somebody who is more connected, who has a perspective that is rooted in the sense of everything, the connectedness to all that is? How does that happen?
So I think there's a couple things. One is that the ability to hold a bigger picture is actually a skill set that has to be developed. And so you start, basically, right? Because as you practice it, it becomes more and more. And the way to start is to pick something bigger than yourself that is already something that you care about, and just start to invest more time and attention in that. Because you can't really start with the whole for the most part. Some people can, but this is a rare quality. So you just start with something that has real meaning and value to you, whether, and usually something in the direction of a cause, whether it's poverty or environmental or animal rights or whatever it is that particularly calls to you as an individual. Start exploring that space more, learn about it, find the nonprofits that are working in it, get engaged, research it, and then from there you'll inherently start to understand all of the other things that apply to that space, and that will allow for an expanded awareness. So I think that's one of the keys.
That's super great. I was just in New York, and a friend, Nick Tarasico, Nick, he runs like a private jet rental company or something. He's in the Brotherhood. He's awesome. He talked about, he did Landmark, and in the advanced or like the leadership course, you have to take on a project. And he took on a project where he ran an event to raise money for music education for kids. And it was like 2 weeks before the event, and he was just freaking out because like nobody was signed up because nobody booked tickets. The event was going to charge him like $5 or $10,000 for something if it didn't happen. Like all of these things happened, and he just kind of broke. And he was like, he called up all of his friends and mentors. He's like, I can't do this. I'm freaking out. And they talked him off the ledge. He ended up having the event. And they said it was the most well-attended and well-funded first event they've ever done for the thing. And it opened up a whole new world of possibility and drive for him in what he wants to create, because that experience was so meaningful to him compared to just going off and doing another business project or another thing and making a little bit more cash. It had such a significant impact that it's fueling him to do more in such a bigger way. So I think it's a genius suggestion to find something small. Do something small. It doesn't have to be that big of an event, but pick some sort of project or charity, figure out a way to get involved for a month and see what happens.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things is just start, right? Like pay attention to something bigger than yourself that motivates you, and take some action, and then more starts to illuminate along the path. The other key piece is enhancing your capacity for empathy.
Yes.
And this is something that I think gets far too little attention in the world. And actually, most people don't, I think, even understand what empathy actually is. Right? People kind of interchange empathy with the idea of caring, but they don't realize that empathy is this sort of unique creature where it's not just understanding what's happening for someone or caring about them, but it's actually allowing yourself to fully step into the experience of another living creature and allow yourself to experience life as they do. And that is, I think, the most profound way to be able to expand one's capacity for awareness and for real maturity. Because when you can not just see a news report about the atrocities that are happening in Syria, but you can actually allow yourself to drop in and feel what it would be like to be a parent there and be suffering on your own, but also experience what it would be like to watch what's happening to your children and to all the people that you care about, and really deeply drop into that. It changes the way in which you think about and the way you experience that dynamic. And it dramatically up-levels your, not just desire, but essentially need to actually do something and shift how you show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, we've become very desensitized, and there's just so much stuff happening, both positive and negative all the time, that we don't really allow ourselves to actually drop in and feel it, because it would just sort of be like this roller coaster. And so we just sort of end up in this kind of middle line, not really allowing ourselves to experience the highs, not really allowing ourselves to experience the lows of our own lives, or more so the lives of the world at large. That kind of desensitization has also created a substantial sense of disconnect. And that, I think, is really the big crux of the whole thing, is allowing ourselves to take the risk to actually feel more.
Yeah. Yeah. And to taste the pain and suffering that somebody else might be experiencing.
There's a Buddhist spiritual practice where, most, especially in sort of like new age practices, you've got all this stuff where people say, okay, I want you to, breathe in the light and just, feel the love, feel the beauty, and then exhale the darkness and just let it out. Right. And clearly there's some benefit to this. I don't remember the name of it, but the Buddhist practice that I'm referring to is where you do exactly the inverse, which is you allow yourself to feel the pain and suffering at the world around and breathe that in. Breathe in as much hardship as you possibly can, and then allow yourself to transmit that into love, and then you breathe out love and kindness. You breathe in the pain and then breathe out love. And it actually can be ungodly difficult, especially in the starting phases. It so dramatically up levels our capacity, where we then start to realize that we as individuals are these powerful tools able to affect change. We're not just needing to try to get benefit from the external world and then let go of our shit. We're actually able to take in and understand the challenges of the world and become the tool by which those become addressed.
Yeah, you shift from consuming to creating your experience, not just being another person that's like leeching on, like taking everything in that's positive, but actually taking in the negative.
Right.
Have you spent much time doing that practice?
Yeah. I mean, not as much time as I probably should.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've definitely spent quite a bit of time with it, and it's a powerful one.
It seems important to touch that experience on a consistent basis, because I think one of the reasons people fear feeling pain or depth is they think it will never end. Like you get in the pain, you think like this is going to go on forever and it'll never escape. But it seems like that's an incredibly powerful practice, because you can actually touch into the pain and you can experience yourself shifting it and knowing that you're not helpless, you're not powerless, that you actually have control and the ability to change things.
Right. And dramatically more so when you're actually willing to feel it and step into it.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're afraid of what's happening around us or in us and we want to avoid it, we're just inherently giving away the power and capacity to do anything about it. And it's only once we're willing to actually be aware of and feel and think about the challenges that we then have the ability to have some capacity to meaningfully impact it. And usually much more so than we think.
Mm-hmm. I love how concrete your examples are and the things to do are. I thought you were just going to be like, oh, you just meditate a little bit more. And I was going to be so annoyed if that was the answer. Like, oh yeah, just meditate more and it'll, but I love this. I want to go back to the idea of empathy, because that was one of the things when we first met that was so striking to me. We started talking about qualia, and qualia is a nootropic, and I've experimented with a handful of nootropics, and I hated all of them. My body's just really sensitive, so it just put me in this like weird, overly caffeinated, kind of on edge state, and I didn't like any of them. And one of the things that you said to me was that you designed qualia to not only increase cognitive function, but simultaneously to increase empathy while increasing your ability to produce. And I thought that was so insightful and so brilliant. I think empathy is possibly one of the greatest skills that you can create as a human for everything. For relationship, for health, for business, like that is something, like you said, that nobody really talks about, but yet it is the driving force behind so many different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back, I guess, quite a number of years at this point, when I used to own the vocational college, well, I took that school over when I was 18, which was too big of a project for that age. And so as a result, I just sort of freaked out immediately. And yeah, for about 2.5 years, every time I would try to fall asleep, I would just wake up in a cold panic sweat that I was going to fail and let everyone in the school down. And over time, I finally learned what I was doing, and it went a lot better. But that process caused actually quite a bit of damage. Even at that young of an age, not sleeping for over 2 years is pretty hard on the body.
Yeah.
I burned myself out really quite badly. I had like stage 3 adrenal exhaustion at 20. I had all kinds of brain fog. I was feeling depressed, unmotivated, like just really struggling. And in the process of trying to understand what was going on for myself and trying to fix it, I started doing this, what at the time was a relatively experimental IV treatment designed for repairing neurotransmitter damage. In the course of doing this treatment over like a 3-day IV, the whole like aspect of mind and self just came back online in a way that it hadn't for quite a long time, but actually also at a higher level. Like my cognitive function came back, my memory came back, my motivation came back. And one of the things that was particularly notable though around this experience was that as I went through this IV therapy, my capacity for empathy and my capacity to feel the interconnectedness of the world around me dramatically increased and became palpable. And so like all these things that I had known from spirituality and activism that were kind of conceptual ideas all of a sudden became these very tangible, real things. It was in that experience that the kind of idea for Qualia and for Neurohacker originally came to be, which was through my own experience of realizing that with the right applications of biochemistry, it was possible to not only increase someone's mental function, their creativity, their memory, their all these different things, but to be able to increase their motivation and increase their empathy so that as they're more capable, as they're more intelligent, as they're more motivated, they are also then motivated to do what is in the best interest of not just themselves, but actually the world at large.
Wow. So you had the experience of hitting like total burnout and then having it come back online through this IV therapy and not only feeling like your ability, your motivation, your cognitive skills come back online, but it's almost like I imagine seeing the world in black and white and then seeing it in color and feeling what it's like to feel empathy again and excitement and drive. And that was kind of the foundation for Qualia.
Mm-hmm. That was essentially where the concept for the whole thing started. It took quite a number of years after that before things came to fruition, because being able to figure out how to develop something that could hope to be able to deliver on that concept in any meaningful way, especially at scale across all the different kinds of physiologies that are out there, that took some time and required people much smarter than me to actually do it. But, eventually we were able to pull something off that is, I think, really quite meaningful in that direction.
How much time did it take to develop?
Probably about 7 years of fairly intensive, just personal experimentation followed by then a 2-year like formal full-time R&D process.
Whoa. How'd you fund this? Did you fund this through personal stuff?
The first period of time I funded just from other business ventures, mostly through the R&D phase. And then once we had kind of moved out of the R&D phase and we're starting to get ready to actually turn this into a company, at that point we started to bring on some other partners and bring in some funding and prepare to actually make a real company that could bring this type of technology out at scale, and then also be able to create a type of science and a system where we can continually develop new products that are able to deliver on areas of real need. And yeah, that definitely got beyond my ability to just self-fund at that point.
Yeah, you're talking a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
If you're listening, I don't know if you're experienced in the biohacking world or played with nootropics at all. I've experimented a little bit because everybody's getting into like the Dave Asprey bulletproof stuff, and everybody's like trying to optimize. And I just didn't really like anything. I don't drink a lot of caffeine. I try and keep my system pretty pure. And then you sent me some of this, and I started experimenting with it. And like I said, I was really blown away. The other experiences I've had, I would either get jittery, get overwhelmed, or I would not sleep at night. It was like a this for that. I would be more productive during the day, and then I would sleep really shitty, and then I would be less productive. Like I would have a day at 150% and then a day at 50%. And so it just wasn't worth the back and forth. But I found with this, like, and if I do full dosing, it's a little intense for my system. So if you'll see with the quality stuff, it's like you take three pills in the morning, an hour later you take about 6 or so is like the recommended dosing. I take about half of that, and that's like a beautiful. It feels I feel clean, I feel focused, and I don't experience a crash or anything. So I don't know what you guys did with building this, but you did it really well. Really well.
Well, we took a very different approach in the design of this than what I've seen anyone else do. My brother is actually the director of research and development for the company, and he's his formal background is in complex system science. And before coming here, he spent most of his adult life in the think tank space working on solving large scale global problems through complex system science, meaning understanding all of the deep complexities and interconnectednesses of a problem and how do you actually address it at world scale, recognizing all the different pieces that are going to move and be impacted. And so he was working on things like redesigning governance, redesigning economics. And then when we decided to launch this, we essentially came in and took a complex system science approach to neurobiology. And that, I think, is kind of fundamentally what is one of the most unique things about what we're doing, is that it's outside of what people are thinking about in the realm of, for the most part, health in general, right? Most of health has gone in the direction of a reductionist approach to science and more in the way of specialization, and people not really understanding how all the different pieces work together. And so when you look at things that even in the cognitive space, people will usually look at wanting to increase one particular aspect of cognitive function. And they'll say, okay, I want increased focus. And so as a result, they'll look at one particular neural pathway, usually the dopamine pathway, that'll be able to increase focus, and they'll take some type of substance that will override that pathway and just provide a whole bunch of in-chain dopamine, which will in fact give you more focus, but it'll do so in a way that is going to have likely long-term detriment, because as you override the system, you then start to become chemically dependent on it because the system itself atrophies. And it also goes in a way that is out of balance with all the other systems. And oftentimes, as you increase one, it'll actually decrease others. So you'll see certain drugs that are on the market where you'll become really focused, but you'll actually reduce your critical thinking skills.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of scary when you think about the implications of that.
Totally.
And so, with us taking this sort of complex systems approach to neurobiology, where we're looking at what are all of the different neural pathways that are involved in different aspects of cognitive function, and how do we create products that are designed to up-level all of those different pathways not through overriding any of them, but actually providing sort of the base nutrients necessary for your body to do the increase and to do so in relative proportion with one another. And this approach allowed us to accomplish something that, to date, I haven't seen anyone else looking at.
It's so amazing, man, because I look at whenever I get stuck in life, nature always has the answers for me. Like, I just go back to nature as a model. I go spend time in nature, and then when I'm out there, I notice how everything works together. Everything in nature works. And there's like this infinity loop, right? Where like things are just, it's designed where you have night and day and seasons, and like you go through this process. And so that's why I've always been not a fan of like getting super into supplements or getting super into nootropics or stuff like that, because I hate that experience of like amplifying one thing and at the expense of something else. I didn't know that was the way you guys designed it. It's really, really smart. Well, I want to let people know we're going to give away a bottle of Qualia. So if you're listening, all you got to do is email me, Andy@thefoundation.com. Email me and let us know, like, share this interview on Facebook or leave us a review on iTunes. Like, one of those things. I think what James has built with Qualia is pretty unique. And you probably haven't heard of it yet, but I'm guessing that you will sometime over the next 6 to 12 months. And we want to help him get as much lift on this as possible. So if you do one of those things, if you share us on Facebook, just email me, and we're gonna the people who do that, we're gonna do a little drawing. We're gonna send one of you a bottle of Qualia. So I want to let people know that.
Awesome. That'll be fun.
Contest for that. So thank you for hooking that up for the crew.
Well, and additionally, we wanted to kind of make a discount available for the kind of listeners for the foundation. So if anyone is interested in trying it and goes to neurohacker.com, just use the coupon code foundation, and that'll give 10% off on anything you want to try.
Awesome. Yeah, I would try it for a month. I mean, that's what I did. I know you guys recommend 5 days a week. I take it 2 to 3 when I just days that I need to be on. And it's a nice little boost that I've really enjoyed having around. So thanks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's actually perfect, right? We try to encourage self-experimentation and kind of a self-empowered approach to your own health and enhancement. And so there's kind of what is the standard dosage that tends to work for the majority of people. And yet we don't want people to just do that. We want them to experiment with trying to find the exact dose that works for them and also the frequency that works. And that's actually intentionally part of the design.
Well, I think it's genius because like you do a month's supply, but a month's supply for me lasts like 3 months. It's ridiculous because it's just like that little bit's just the perfect amount for me. So it's really, really great. I really appreciate hearing the way that you look at the world and looking at the world through an integrated approach, taking into account the whole. It's something that I don't hear hardly any entrepreneurs talk about. And I think that can be like the dark side of entrepreneurship and business, where it's like we're just focused on one thing at the expense of the planet, at the expense of other things. And it's just not sustainable. And I think you're spot on that something needs to shift in our world. And it's pretty cool to see you guys leading the way with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, man. So again, if you're listening, check out, is it neurohackercollective.com? Is that where?
Actually, just neurohacker.com.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Neurohacker.com.
Neurohacker Collective will get you there too, but neurohacker.com.
Neurohacker.com. Use the coupon code foundation and we'll get you hooked up with a discount on Qualia if you guys want to check it out. And if you do, I would love to know, guys, if you do check it out, email me and let me know how it goes, because I'm really curious how it's been for you, because it's been unique for me. So, James, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Catch you later.
Have a good one.